Hello and welcome to episode 244 of the Paint All the Minis podcast. We put the show together so you can have something to listen to whilst you are sitting at your paint desk and painting miniatures of any scale, genre or game. Or you're on your commute, or you're driving somewhere, or you're walking the dog, or you're on the toilet, or you're doing some DIY, or other things. Please let me know. It's stupidly, weirdly, the thing that I enjoy the most. People telling me how and when and where they listen to the show is weirdly what I like. It's not the main sole reason that I do the whole podcast, but it's up there. It's up there. So if you listen, however you listen, let me know. Let me know because it's interesting, and I'll tell you where you can let me know a little bit later. Our aim is to have a relaxed and genuine conversation with someone who's as involved in the hobby as you are, from any level, from top to bottom, because we all have our own unique stories. Sit at your hobby desk, paint your models, listen to the chat. We really do hope that you enjoy the content. The content that's free. It's free for you. Enjoy. And if you think someone else that you know will enjoy it, please pass it on to them, because you know it's a little gift. It's a little gift that you can give to a friend, and it's free. It's free, it's awesome. This week I speak to Troy, who runs the awesome Sonic Sledgehammer Studio YouTube channel. Troy is a first-timer here on the Paint All the Minis show, so we do the deep dive into his backstory and spend some time picking and pecking around the parts that jumped out during the chat. A little bit like a crow on a battlefield. We peck at the lip, peck at the eyeball. That's a really gross analogy. Sorry about that, Troy. But yeah, we kind of peck around a little areas that seem interesting. Some little morsels here, some little morsels there. And I think that what Troy tries to do with his YouTube channel and how he achieves it, I think it's fantastic. And along with his attitude, his mentality, and his outlook towards our hobby, he's a great personality, and the hobby is really richer because of people like him being in it, going that extra mile to not only just enjoy the hobby himself, but to put together content and throw it out there for us so that we can enjoy it is really humbling. It's amazing. So thank you, Troy, for all the things that you do, and we hope that you continue doing that far into the future. Thank you for coming on, and hopefully we do chat again in the future, because you are a delightful chap. If you want to hang out with the Paint All the Minis community, which is a bunch of chilled, laid-back, like-minded individuals, you can click on a link to our Discord in the podcast description. There's a link in there that never expires. You can email paintalltheminis@gmail.com. You can come and get involved in a Facebook group. You can follow on Blue Sky or however else. Come and knock on my door. I want to talk about some minis. A little bit like a painting Mormon. You can feel free, if you can find out where I live. Come and knock on my door and we can chat about the hobby. That's pretty much it for the pre-ramble. I hope that you guys are doing well. Stick around until the end for the post-ramble. But I think that is pretty much it. Let's go!
Paint all the minis. Paint all the minis that you can. And when you paint your minis, listen to that podcast with Dan Adams, that is.
I know what you're thinking. Did he paint 6 armies or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement, I've kind of lost track myself. But being that this is Paint All the Minis, the best place for painting and hobby on the internet, and people aren't going to bite your head clean off for posting, you got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
So hey, I am here with Troy, aka Sonic Sledge. How's it going?
It's going very well, thank you.
Nice stuff. What time are you on? What time are we recording where you are?
It is just gone past 1 o'clock, so it's a
1
nice,
o'clock.
dismal grey day.
Nice. So just past lunchtime. So are you a lunch guy? Are you a big lunch eater?
I'm honestly more of a dinner kind of guy.
Okay.
Lunch I'll have a cereal bar or something like that, but I'm a dinner guy. I love my hot meals.
Nice. What would be, if I was coming around to your house for a meal, what would you cook me? How many courses would it have, and what would you cook?
Wow, courses. I'm not got a Michelin star or anything like that. If someone coming around, okay, so without knowing anything about you
I'll eat
preferences,
anything.
allergies, stuff like that. Okay, I'll eat anything. I'd probably throw on a goulash.
Nice.
We're quite lucky that the part of Germany that we're in, has seen quite a lot of cultural influence from over towards the east, so Czech Republic and Hungary and what have you. So the goulash stuff that you can pick up around here is wicked. And I love the ethos of being able to throw everything into one pot and leave it alone. It is lazy boy cooking, and that suits me down to the ground.
Yeah, those recipes are great, aren't they? We had a lot of those recipes growing up as a kid because my mum and dad both worked long hours, and so they would put something on before they went out, and then we'd come back from school, and all we had to do is stir it, make sure it didn't explode or burn the place down, and then when after about 6 hours, when they came back too and we were all together, that was when it was dinner time. Nice. Okay, so for people that have got no idea what goulash is, I think a lot of the listenership will know, but for people that don't know what goulash is, it's a stew of sorts, is that right? And what would you put in there?
Normally it's stew is a pretty good comparison. It's typically either beef or pork diced, chuck in onion and a fair chunk of paprika, and you let that simmer for a while before adding tomato sauces and other normally slightly sweet. It tends to be slightly sweet the way that I make it anyway. And you simmer that for an hour and a half or so, and then you have meat that falls apart, a couple of bits of veggies in there. Typically you serve it with potatoes cooked in the actual stew, but some folks around here like to do it with rice, weirdly enough. But I'm a rice person, so I'm not complaining about about local variations.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so you've alluded to it there, but you are not originally from Germany, but that's where you live, right? So whereabouts in Germany you're based?
I am, well, it's fun because if you imagine as far away as it's possible to get from the middle of Germany, that's basically where I am. I can start counting out towns and go, hey, do you know Munich? Okay, go north. You know Nuremberg? Okay, go east. You know Weiden? Go east. I live in a tiny wee town. It is 5,000 people at the last census. And it's about 20 minutes from the Czech border. So I am, if I step out of my front door and I walk for less than 5 minutes, I will hit the Black Forest and get very lost.
Amazing. That sounds cool. That sounds really interesting. So how did you end up there in this little small town of 5,000 people?
It's a long story, but it all has to, it's love. Like everything else good in life,
best reason.
Has to do with love. My lovely wife
goulash.
comes. Love of good food and things. My other half, we actually met while we were both living in England. Turns out she's from around here. So when we got together, and me being a New Zealander and her being a German, when she had finished her degree, we kind of went, are we going to stay in England? Are we going to move somewhere? What's going to happen? So we moved to New Zealand for a while, and then eventually the decision was made, why don't we try Germany for a bit? And here we are. I think it's been almost 10 years, 11 years now, and I live in a little place that looks like the cover of a Christmas cookie tin. It's amazing. Yeah, it's really, really cool. It's awesome. How is your German? Have you immersed yourself in the local culture? I've tried. It doesn't make me sound very good, but I have not mastered German for all the time that I've been here because, and I feel like there are extenuating circumstances. When I arrived, as part of immigration process, you have to do a German course so that you can communicate basic needs to doctors and police officers and so forth. So I live in Bavaria, which you may know, if you're not familiar, speaks basically it's a quite significant dialect change from what's called High German or Hochdeutsch. So you go to the community college and you do your immigration course and you get taught High German. You get taught Hochdeutsch.
Right.
Then you go in the street. I tell you what, it is next to useless. So I am much better now with my Bavarian than I was, funnily enough, 9 years ago. But I do struggle a little bit. But as long as I can order beer, sausage, and dumplings, call for the police. I'm happy. I'll be all right.
That's really cool. Do you see yourself, is that you now? Have you enjoyed it so much? You kind of, put down roots there, or do you see a move in the future?
Honestly, not sure. Like my other half and I, Mrs. Sledge, let's say, we have talked about it a few times about where we want to end up, but I don't think we've really come to a definitive answer. So it might be another 20 years I finally speak Bavarian, or I don't know, we'll teach her the ins and outs of the Kiwi dialect.
Yeah. Is there different big differences in like North and South Island with New Zealand, or is it largely the same?
Language-wise, it is pretty similar. Like you'd be hard pressed to misunderstand somebody from the different islands. Mainly, it's in the accent that you'll get, because back in the day when all the settlers were coming over from the UK, the majority of Scottish settlers came all the way across the seas and oceans to the bottom of the planet, and they found a hilly, rainy, miserable, grey part of New Zealand, and they went, "Oh, it's just like home." We're going to
brilliant. Yeah. This is the place. Travelled all this way for the same thing.
The same thing. And
very true.
Yeah, so that's insane. I love it though. Yeah, it's just a wonderful mindset. But if you do go south, folks do have a tendency to roll their R's a little more. There's a bit of that brogue still in the language.
Is there a difference in mentality as well in terms of how people look at life, or how people approach the work or their leisure time?
Oh God, yes. I think the best example, this is kind of going off on a tangent, but I think it will illustrate the point wonderfully. Once upon a time, I worked for an electricity company in New Zealand. And my job, I was one of the poor phone biscuits you'd call in when you had a problem with your bill, or the power wasn't going, whatever. And the example would be, some days I'd get a call from somebody down south, normally Christchurch or Dunedin, the larger places in the South Island, and they'd go, I haven't had any power for an hour. Do you have any update on when that's going to be? And you go, oh shit, nobody's even called in through the phone company. We didn't realize. Well, we'll get you sorted. Yeah. Whereas if you go into the North Island, folks are a little bit more demanding. Isn't the word, but they move a bit quicker. Yeah. And when you settle, you look up to Auckland, and Auckland's our biggest city, over 1 million people. The power will be out there for 20 seconds, and then suddenly every phone line is just jammed red. So I would say the difference between North and South, South Islanders, they're a little more self-reliant, I guess, a little quicker to roll with the punches and just deal with the hand that's there. Kiwis are generally pretty relaxed, but you go south and people are so laid back. They're horizontal,
Nice, that's awesome. Right, so I feel like I just talked to you about where you've been and what you've up to for ages, but we are here to talk about the hobby a little bit. So I've mentioned it in the introduction, but for some people that might not have listened to the introduction, give us a little bit of a snapshot of kind of like how we might have heard of you and how we might be aware of the things that you do right now. Like, what do you do?
Well, if you have maybe heard of me, I run the channel Sonic Sledgehammer over on YouTube, which is mostly a painting tutorial, painting guide channel. And the purpose of the channel there is that folks can come along. It's aimed more towards either beginners or folks who don't have a lot of time, so who are looking for quick methods to get reasonably nice looking armies on the table. Over time, it's kind of developed into me doing a stupid amount of research for different historical periods, because I did become aware that there was a gap, a barrier for folks kind of coming to historical wargaming saying, I don't want to get it wrong, I'm intimidated by the colors. And that seemed like a good place to step in and go, well, hang on, I can help you there.
That's really cool. So that's awesome. So let's kind of put a pin in that, because you don't just wake up on a Monday morning and just decide to do that. I'm guessing it's a long period of time that you've been doing other things before you decide to go into the world of YouTube. So how far back do we have to go to find your first encounter with either painting or board games or RPGs or tabletop war games?
Ooh. Because the answer to a few of those questions is slightly different.
Okay.
If we go all the way back, I think the earliest was kind of a cross between wargaming and tabletop games, because I recall being 8 or 9 years old, and a buddy of mine, he had Hero Quest.
Nice.
And I think Hero Quest probably set off quite a few folks on their on their hobby journeys. And his dad had painted the figures in the set, and they weren't fantastic, but I remember very clearly seeing the difference between the little grey plastic things that he hadn't done anything with yet and the painted ones, and just thinking, wow, I want to do that. So it was a couple of years later, and I was about to turn 10, and my grandfather, I think in hindsight, possibly unwisely, got me some gift vouchers for our local like comic book and hobby store, and that's where I trundled in, and just wide-eyed kid with everything laid out in front of me, and I realized there's grown-ups that play toys. You know, I can. How mind-blowing is that to a kid to realize? Wait a second, that's serious business. That is. That's not just pushing my Legos across the room and humming the Back to the Future theme until my voice gives out. That's real games.
Yeah. So what did you decide to spend your vouchers on?
My very first, I remember it clearly. It was it was a box of metal Cadian shock troops from Warhammer 40,000, and there was I think it might actually have been Battlefront doing the 15mm scale stuff at the time, but it was a resin and metal Crusader 2 from World War II. And I got them home, and I cracked them open, and then I realized, oh shit, I need super glue, I need files and knives and adult supervision, and I didn't have any of that, so it started started a bit slow.
You had to wait till your next birthday. Get more batch.
I was lucky enough to be able to, my grandfather, he was always very supportive of me making or creating stuff, and he was never a huge like creative person himself. I don't even think I've ever seen him pick up a book to read for pleasure, but when he saw me as a kid kind of growing up this different way and being a bit more flights of fancy and stuff like that, I love my creative things and making stuff up, and he saw that and went, that's cool for a kid to be able to do, and he made sure that I was able to pursue these crazy hobbies as they came along.
I think it's good that gift vouchers as well. Gift vouchers is something that's like quite a common and given thing now, isn't it, to give people gift vouchers? But as I think about when I was a kid, I don't remember getting many gift vouchers, and I don't remember people talking about gift vouchers so much. So it's great that you've got that choice to go into that store and make your own decision. That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, I think he might have planned that I was going to go pick up a Superman comic or something simple, and instead I ruined my bank balance for the remainder of my life. Should have just given me crap.
Yeah. So do you remember actually getting around to painting those guys? And did you do it seriously? Did you take your time, or did you just literally slather something on and go and make some noises in the garden?
Oh, those guys! I tell you, it's kind of a tragedy because I never did end up painting those figures. It would be, I think it was another couple of years before other kids at school were getting into model soldiers and Warhammer and stuff like that. And this was very much the days when being a nerd and having creative hobbies and geeky hobbies, or you didn't advertise that.
No, that's true. Yeah.
So it was a bit of a slow start, but getting the opportunity and like-minded friends that we could pool our resources, would quite regularly all come together and ruin one another's brushes and paints. But I think it was 13 or so was when I really started actually getting into the painting side and the real hobby side of things, and finally could play some games.
And what were you painting? What were you playing?
I was playing, even all those ways back, I was painting and playing a mixture of 40k, because I liked men and guns and tanks and aliens. It's simple to latch onto. Yeah. And there were the Revell box sets at the time, which normally came with about 20 plastic, good old soft plastic infantry and a vehicle. Okay. So we actually ended up going back to one of the seminal works of wargaming. We were very lucky that the library in our town had a copy of War Games by Donald Featherston.
Yes, dude, this has been like about 50 episodes since this has come up. So nice. Okay, so just tell people what that is, and the fact that the library had it. Great. So what is this tome of ages? Talk to us about it. It's kind of a classic. It was, I think, one of the very first attempts to codify a lot of what goes on in the hobby. And it was a starting point because Donald Featherston, the author, I think he was in the artillery or something back in the Second World War, and when he came back had the same kind of mindset of a lot of guys of what would I have done differently. And wargaming, I think, opened up a lot of opportunities for folks to, zero stakes warfare. There's quite a few service members of the period. You look at them talking about how they relax, and wargaming, you would think would put them off, but instead, no, it's quite a useful hobby. But Donald Featherston got together and started collecting and writing rules for almost every conceivable period in history for people to be able to pick up whatever miniatures they could and play games. And it just, I think for the English wargaming scene in particular, it really set off the blokes and shed kind of era of wargaming. And it still cracks me up because the book itself has this wonderful narrative tone. It is absolutely of its time. And at one point it talks about ultra-modern wargaming, and it's talking about the Korean War. So you're looking at the options we have these days. But it was this, I hesitate to say dated, because the rules and the advice in there are pretty timeless, but here's this old book that we just happened to find in our library, and there's 5 or 6 of us absolutely glommed onto it, and we're convinced we were going to be the next greatest thing to happen. So kind of a long journey from that little book. Yeah, sure. And so you mentioned about, seriously painting and taking it seriously. So were you the painter of the group, or was everybody similarly inclined?
I was very much the painter. I don't think that it happened because I was any more interested in painting than anybody else. It's just I tended to find the easy way of doing things. And I think back to, because I don't have any of my original miniatures anymore, but I do remember what they looked like, and it was not, they were not astonishing, let's say, but the paint was in the right places. And I think my friends would quite regularly pass me like their bulk infantry and go, hey, can you paint me this unit? I'll give you a couple of dollars. And so I was the painter from very early on. And I recall taking, because where I was at the time, there was only 2 Games Workshop stores in all of New Zealand. So going to Games Workshop was kind of a pilgrimage. It was about a 2-hour drive from where I lived.
Jesus.
And I took in one day, I happened to have, it was Katachan Jungle Fighters, and I took them in, and I didn't expect to play a game or anything. I couldn't tell you what actually prompted me to do it, but I took them in and showed the fella who was working there, and he gave me some really good advice, and was really super positive about, you got the paint in the right places, you've got nice thin coats, that's actually quite difficult to do, and he was really encouraging. And I think that as well had a huge effect on me as a kid and probably as a person.
I think you're right there. You mentioned about how maybe we're at school and we got some hobbies that might consider to be not popular. So to be able to kind of take, like you're saying, you wanted to take those, and then you're getting some praise and some advice and some encouragement. That's something that maybe you weren't getting from lots of other places, or you didn't feel you could do that. And that's really nice. Like, well done, that guy. That guy did a great job, right?
He really did. Like, I don't know where my little hobby journey would have ended up because I remember that conversation so clearly, and it was huge for a 16-year-old at the time.
That's cool. That's really, really good. So the kind of general tone sometimes is that, we do it at school, but then as we graduate and think about college or think about the world of work, that kind of hobby slips away. You mentioned it before about how, adults playing with toys, but so did it remain a fixture for you, or did you set it aside when you kind of went to college?
Well, I thought that as I got older, I was 18 and we moved over to the UK. And I had it in my head that I was going to put these childish things behind me, and I was going to grow up and become a real adult and, pay taxes and all that carry on. But the trouble was that I had then moved from sleepy New Zealand to literally the home of Games Workshop, and it did not take long for the siren call to really drag me straight back. I think I might have been, air quotes, out of the hobby for maybe 3 months.
For the flight.
Close enough. And then I got off and got into town and realized, there's a workshop here and there.
Right.
This is just something that is in every town now, and it blew me away. It really.
People talk about the cost difference, especially in Australia. With the import and the amount. Like, did you find that? Was that another incentive to get going? Did you find it was cheaper, or did you not notice a difference between how expensive it was in New Zealand compared to in the UK?
At the time, I hadn't really paid attention.
Okay.
So I couldn't tell you whether or not, but it did seem, because I was lucky enough that I had next to no overheads. I had a pretty well-paying job, and I had, when I first arrived, I had no friends and all the time in the world. So suddenly, all of these toy soldiers right in front of me seemed super cheap by comparison. So I did make unwise financial decisions very quickly.
Those days are amazing, aren't they? When you start getting your first jobs, especially if you live at home also, you just get, like, I remember working part-time in a kitchen just washing up. I remember getting a paycheck like maybe £50. But I just remember that just being like £5 million. And it was just like, all this is just for me to do the fun things. And those are heady days, right?
Yep. You get that 50 quid in your hand and you're like, I am Rockefeller.
Exactly right. So were you just solely painting? Did you get a good painting setup? Like, how did you progress? How did you grow? Because you mentioned that you were cash rich. So did you go all out into everything? I
mostly bought far more miniatures than I would ever paint in my lifetime. Okay. I had this noble goal of, they're going to look really cool. And it wasn't until I moved to a slightly bigger place. I ended up in Gloucester, and the Games Workshop there hosted regular gaming nights, and that's when my social life returned to me, because here's these like-minded people, we're all playing games, and the encouragement there and the incentive of everybody wanting to put painted miniatures down, that really helped in a big way. So I was suddenly painting more miniatures, looking for advice and what have you, and we were extremely fortunate that we had in the area a couple of Golden Demon winners who would just casually come and hang out and dish out advice.
Nice.
So for this kid from New Zealand who was now a young man, having world-renowned painters just say, then your paint's a little more, and here's how you can cheat an edge highlight. You know, those little tips just changed so much about how I thought about painting. It wasn't this staid thing that was in print, that was, you know, only a few photos. It was live, and it was something you could ask questions to as well. Someone, I should say. But,
how did you find the cultural transition? Were you welcomed into the local environment? Were people keen to talk to you and get to know you, or were they standoffish?
I was quite lucky, I think, in that I was an oddity, which I suppose that's one way of putting it. No, but I did stand out a bit because I sounded different and I dressed a little differently, and I think it made folks, not the barriers so much as the guards dropped a little bit, because you know, people see this strange guy, but he seems to mean well, and so I was welcomed in quite quickly, which was nice, and I count myself as very lucky.
And how serious were you taking playing? Were you really enjoying the kind of the competition, the direct competition, or was it just more of a, hey, let's just do some narrative fun and see what happens on the table?
It really depended on who I would be up against. I take a lot of cues from the energy that somebody else is bringing to a table. So I wouldn't say that I deliberately hamstring myself in any circumstance, but sometimes I would put down an army for whatever game we were playing that wasn't optimized, but I liked the units. That was normally where my choices went. And if I got walloped, it didn't really bother me. But as well, if somebody would come up and say, oh, I really want to play a serious, I want this to be difficult, I want you to bring your A game, then I would do my best to try and match that. I was never that good. There was a time when I had an unbeaten Space Marine army, and it was because I had completely, by chance, fluked on a series of units and army abilities and what have you that just matched how I like to play, which is to run towards the enemy like a maniac.
Right.
I'm not a complex person.
The Highland Charge, but Space Marine style.
Yeah. And then they changed the rules, and my army didn't work anymore, and I went back to losing. So the good times were over.
That's cool. And so you mentioned when you first picked up models, there was a World War II tank, Crusader tank, I believe you said, and some Imperial Guard. And then, but it's Games Workshop has been pretty predominant. So it was always that, and has it always been this, or were you also doing some historical stuff, or some more fantasy different things?
It's really only in the last, I would say, 10 years that my interests, and it wasn't because of any large decision, it wasn't any huge change in the company or what have you, but there was a part of me that went, oh god, I've been playing Warhammer and Age of Sigmar and all that for so long, but I know that there are these other choices out there. God, and then I thought back to war games and Don Featherston and super modern Korean War miniatures. And thought, well, shit, why don't I stick my foot out a little bit, dip my toes into something different? And I found it really interesting, because I think it just happened to be at precisely the right moment online that these communities, different forums and Discord groups and websites and all that were really coming to the fore, where you could go and find like minds. And I think it's quite funny that there is a reputation, and bless Games Workshop fans, and I say this having a leg in both fandoms. Games Workshop fans look towards historicals and think, oh, those are the rivet counting nerdo anorak guys who they'll argue with you about the color of Napoleon's laces. And then the historical team are always seen as looking over and going, oh, well, the Warhammer kiddies, that's baby's first war game. And it's just being able to step into both of those fandoms, as it were, and those people just don't exist. Yes. There is a myth about how both sides kind of look at each other, and I don't think it pans out in reality at all. So
yeah, I'd echo that. There's always there's a bell curve, isn't there? There's always going to be amazing people, and there's always going to be some odd people, but largely the general area in the middle of the bell curve is everyone's just all right. They're just fine. But we associate with the outliers a little bit more because they are so different from the general norms. That's really cool, man. It's really great. And so what did you jump into then? What was your first kind of foray into something non-GW?
It was bolt action.
Okay.
I remember very clearly because I wanted something that had rules available, box sets available, something that was going to be easy to jump straight on top of. And bolt action was the easy way in because Warlord Games, familiar names up and down the company, and the game itself played in a way that I was kind of familiar with. And there was miniatures, really easy to get my hands on. So that was where I set off again.
You're still in the UK at this point?
No, by this point I had moved. We were in Germany.
Okay.
So I've skipped out a vast portion of my life, but it's not very interesting in the middle. So we can
work happened at that point.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. And so did you take? So you built up armies. You were playing a lot of stuff in the UK, and then you said you went back to New Zealand, right, when you first got married, or you went with your girlfriend at the time, right, to New Zealand. Did you take the hobby back with you and continue it there, or did you leave that stuff in the? Okay, cool.
No, I was lucky to be able to pack up all of my stuff, and it went into a very slow boat, which took 5 months to arrive in New Zealand. So I was sitting there the whole time, just drumming on the table, going, "Where are my toys?" No, when we got there, I was able to drag things out and play games again, and just set up my little hobby room. But it was a little more personal at that point. The scene wasn't quite as big. Owing to the fact that there's fewer people in the country.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I started to think of it and to approach it more as a relaxing hobby. Rather than I'm painting miniatures to put painted miniatures on the table to play games with. I think that was the stage when it became, I actually enjoy painting. God, heaven forfend, I'm having fun with the painting side of the hobby. So kind of lucked out.
What is it about that time, especially, that you started to enjoy?
I don't know. I hate to not have an answer for something, but I think I just got older. I'd matured a little bit, and the be-all and end-all wasn't armies on the table. It was enjoying the process. A little bit more of the Bob Ross aspect of, no, every day is a good day when you paint. It was quiet, and it was personal, and it was something to do where you could just lose yourself in the process and enjoy spacing out. So that made a big difference.
Did you start to feel that you were getting good at it? You mentioned last time we talked about painting, you were talking about how the Golden Demon painters would just pop by and give you some advice and feedback, and you that jumped out to you when you visited the GW store in New Zealand when you took your Jungle Fighters there. So did you feel like you were getting good at it, and did you feel like you wanted to do that same thing with other people? Were you encouraging other people around you as well?
So there is a part of me which looks at what I do and still thinks of it as being rather workmanlike. It is the nature of the hobby, and certainly online spaces, that we compare ourselves to our peers, whoever they might be. And on the one hand, logically, I'm aware of doing something quite different in my approach of, I want painted armies, nice but easy, versus I would like to follow a skill to perfection, to practice something to the point of mastery. And I think that's a noble goal, but it's not what I wanted to do. As I realized I was getting all right at painting, it was a little celebratory moment, but it was still, I think, as a means to an end, rather than I want to be great at this.
I get that, and that's one of the key reasons I really love the hobby, because we all enter and engage with the hobby on many different levels, and there's so many different positives that you can get out of it that there's not one end destination. One of the things that I really like about your videos is you quite regularly do like what I would call in my own head, and I've never verbalized this, like a dust highlight. So you'll be painting a World War II guy, and then you'll do a dust highlight. So you'll dry brush like a light dusty colour over the entire miniature, and then put a wash on, because that is a very effective way to get a certain effect. I really like that. So that efficiency style that you go for, I do really appreciate. It's like it's a skill and a mastery in itself, where it's like what actually is worth it, what actually makes a big effect. Because I've done it sometime. I painted a Sherman tank a good few years ago now. I painted 3 Sherman tanks. I painted one like in a snow camo. I painted one with just some basic work, and then I painted a third with like oil paints. So I did what is called oil paint rendering, where you put little blobs of yellow, green, black and white on various different parts, and you blend them all together. It takes hours. It took me about 15 hours, which was amazing. It was great in itself. But when I actually looked at the oil paint rendered tank compared to the one that was the basic job, you couldn't really tell too much unless you took it under a really good light. When you took it under a really good light and really looked at it, you could definitely tell. But from the tabletop or from just a casual glance, you couldn't really tell at all. So I really appreciate the things that you do, and it's really great that people have the ability to engage in our hobby without the feeling that they need to do the same thing as the person next to them. We can all find our own success in it, and you're doing your own thing, right? And it's great also that you're so humble. It's like saying, well, I don't really consider it to be good. I mean, but for the approach that you're taking and for the outcome that you're looking for, you are very successful at doing that. It's very efficient. It's very effective what you do.
Yeah, thank you. I think a conversation many years ago while in the workshop was talking about the law of diminishing returns.
Yes.
There comes a point when you're doing more work to a miniature than you need to. Have you thought about what is it you're trying to achieve? And I think especially in painting, if you can take a step back and have that moment to consider your project before launching all out at it, you might just enjoy the journey a little more, because there's less stress, there's less hassle, there's less worry about the next step.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really important. It's awesome. But and so you kind of mentioned that you went back to New Zealand, and then it was in Germany that you started reaching out to Bolt Action. So when did ideas of content start to kind of percolate around your grey matter?
Well, that one I can tell you quite simply. I never planned to be doing this. A YouTube channel I put the air quotes up and go a YouTuber. I never planned to be online doing content creator sort of thing. It came about by accident, because a buddy of mine over in the States, he wanted to paint some miniatures, and it was for his Call of Cthulhu board game. And he said, I'm looking for some advice. I know you paint these things. And we were talking about how to do it, and it just wasn't quite clicking for him. And I realized what he was struggling with was dry brushing. And I'm saying, you just put one color over the top and then you give it a wash and blah, blah, blah. But he couldn't quite perceive it until I said, well, hang on a second. Let me just go ahead. I'll put my phone up. I'll record what I'm talking about, and I'll give it a little voiceover and then pass it back to you. So I did that. A complete, 101 to painting, not particularly polished at all. Put that up on YouTube, and then I don't know if I meant for it to be public or what, but a week or so later, a comment came along. Just the fluke of the algorithm had shown this to somebody else, and they went, oh, how might I do XYZ? And I kind of cottoned on, I'll answer that question. And then more questions started coming, and it dawned on me, there is a gap. Because if you look back at the online sort of instruction painting scene about 8 to 10 years ago, you had Games Workshop producing, with Duncan and these very, I hesitate to say formulaic, but very step by step, and they're showing you the workshop way to paint. And similarly, you would have people putting out guides for how they have done incredible non-metallic metal or airbrushed effects on their things. And I saw, hang on, there's a gap here. There's folks who want to come into the hobby, but all they're seeing is these absolutely astonishing pieces of work, and getting from point 0 to 100 is daunting.
Yeah.
So it was really a gradual process of it dawning on me, there is a gap here, and I think it's putting people off not having a simpler way in. And so I thought to myself, well, I'm simple, I can do that.
Nice. Why Sonic Sledgehammer? What's the genesis of this?
Well, that goes back a very long way. I was 13 or 14, and I can't remember what it was I was signing up for, but it needed a username. And I was a big Doctor Who fan. And this is before 2005. This is before Doctor Who was cool again. So I had it in my head. It was like the Sonic screwdriver is really cool, but what would be something that's the opposite of that? Something that is not subtle and is ridiculous. And so Sonic Sledgehammer was the name that popped up. And so I used that. And then decades later, along comes YouTube and it says, oh, you need a username, you need a name for your channel. And so at the time, little realizing how it was going to utterly define my presence, I thought to myself, go on, I'll just use Sonic Sledgehammer again. And history was made.
There you go. That's awesome. And so you mentioned that you made a little video for a friend, and then a question, and then subsequent questions. So how do you approach your content creation? How do you decide what to do? How do you figure out what to do, and how do you plot it in?
Well, a lot of it is down to the questions that people are asking. Sometimes it is a matter of there's a new release that's coming, which is extremely cool, and I would like one for my collection. Or sometimes it's something that I've caught from the corner of my eye, which has a reputation for being difficult, and I like to break those down as challenges and go, well, how could I do that in a simpler way? Make that approachable for somebody. I hesitate to say that there's ever truly a plan. Some days it is literally I get up, I go to my cupboard full of toys and go, okay, what have I got built? It's you today. And sometimes it's questions from people, or it just happens to be coinciding with, like a release, which the Krieg, Death Core of Krieg, when they came along, that was one where a lot of people wanted to know. So I'm quite fortunate now that a lot of what I do is governed either by folks having genuine questions, or I am quite fortunate that a lot of companies will reach out and go, oh, hey, do you mind painting XYZ? And I'm not got a huge problem with turning around and putting models on the table, or models on the channel rather, because to my mind, a miniature is, you like it or you don't, you buy it or you don't. It doesn't matter too much if somebody says, oh, what's the difference between these 3 different manufacturers for World War II Germans? You'll probably see them on the channel at some point, but you're still able to approach it and say, well, I like those ones. It's
and there's also a lot you can learn from a technique or a color or something. There's times where I've watched some of your videos and I've used something on a US World War II troop that was when you weren't painting a US World War II troop. Does that kind of make sense? And so it's like you don't have to be painting that specific thing. You can do, and that helps, and that's really good to follow along. And there has been times where I've been following along or watching a few things, and even more so watching this from this channel, watching that from that channel, and amalgamating in something that I would like to do. But you can still learn across. You still learn techniques, and sometimes just even watching that technique in play can help you on a subsequent model in the future as well. So that's really good, and it's really good to have that wide variety. And it's really good that you're saying there is like you like it or you don't, you paint it or you don't. That's a really cool mentality to have. So how how did you feel maintaining? Has it always been kind of like a brand new challenge, a brand new day, a brand new interest level, or did it blow up and be much bigger than you thought it would be? Has it been a struggle to keep it going? Did you ever get jaded with anything, or has it always been fun and interesting for you?
Oh, that's a good one. It definitely happened by accident, like I said, and there was a point, like the clear video which really kicked off the channel and put it into the public eye was an Imperial Guard video that I did way back in the day. It's 6 years old or so now, and I'm still really proud of the end result. It is literally still how I paint things. And that was when requests and interest and just a huge, the numbers went through the roof. And YouTube is really, really good at telling you what is successful and what's not. I think sometimes to the detriment of enjoying the process, as you mentioned. I can't say that I ever really meant for it to be a sustained effort, but the longer that people kept asking questions, I kind of feel like when you come across an audience, whether you've cultivated that deliberately or not, there is a responsibility, not necessarily to just keep producing, but to be doing the right thing by the people who've come to you genuinely and they want your help. So if I'm able to answer a question or put it into simpler terms to somebody, then cool. I find that really quite encouraging for myself as well. But the point at which the channel really began to start ticking as its own entity, and people started kind of recognizing me in places as, oh, you're that Sonic Sledgehammer guy. There was a brief moment where I thought, damn, dude, is this something that I want to continue? Did you consider that might happen before you did things? When people did start recognizing either your voice or your presence, and how did you feel when that started happening? I had no idea. I really came into this completely blind, and it's quite telling when folks will ask, oh, what's your advice for YouTube, or how do you start a YouTube channel? And I genuinely throw my hands up and go, man, I do not know. I was picked out by the algorithm, and it just started snowballing from there.
Yeah, it didn't. Because if you're putting together a whole bunch of tosh where you're like, offending everybody and licking your miniatures, maybe that would make you famous or renowned in a different way. But don't be too modest about it, mate. The way that you approach things, your mentality, the ideology around your videos is one that people want to be around and people take note of, and so it's like that a certain charisma and a certain magnetism that people just think, oh, he's a chilled, laid back guy who's taking everything in his stride and he's just doing stuff that he enjoys. That's what people find interesting, mate. People find that mentality interesting, and that's cool. So that's good. So don't be too modest, mate. You do great work. You do a great job.
Well, that was genuinely one of the harder parts to really to get to grips with, was that people were looking for my advice, and they weren't looking for reading it out of a book or what have you. They were coming to me specifically, and I did find that quite daunting at first when it sort of clicked that, oh shit, I'm being trusted here as a source. But I think part of the appeal of the videos too is that it's still the same setup as it was almost at the very beginning. I'm recording on my phone. It's all a bit garage band, and the impression that anyone can do this is really what I want to be able to keep putting out there, because I think the tendency is to put on ourselves a higher standard than we might be comfortable with just enjoying in the hobby. So I'm still using my phone. I'm still dry brushing shit. It doesn't have to be astonishing to be fun.
And have you been tempted to get a better and bigger camera and get some lights and have a whole hobby set up in the garage where you've got all this stuff? Has that been a temptation to make what would people say would be the next step, or has it been easy to stay who you are?
I'll tell you the truth. I would still like a better camera. and a slightly easier boom to work with, because at the moment, recording off of my phone, it can be a little bit tricky to keep things in shot for certain things I'm trying to demonstrate. But I would still, I don't like the idea of turning things into a studio, if that makes sense. Despite the name Sonic Sledgehammer Studio, I don't want a full-on production level sort of look to things. It is literally, here's your camera, here's the method, go use it, have fun.
And I think that kind of and that fits in with your mentality with how you approach miniatures as well. It's it works, it's fine, it's great, it gets a great result. So why make it more complicated than it needs to be?
Yeah, there is a synchronicity there, I think.
That's cool. That's interesting. So, how you mentioned there about how people potentially recognize, and you mentioned the Imperial Guard video being one that kind of, set things rolling a little bit more. So, how did you feel when people were reaching out and saying, "Hey, would you paint this for us?" And did you just say yes to everything? Are you very particular about what you say yes or no to? Is there a set stipulations that people say, well, you can paint it, but you've got to do X, Y, Z? How do you approach that whole people offering you stuff?
That one was something very early on that I wanted to make sure was not going to influence how I did things. I was kind of worried from the outset that taking on, a job like that, or what's the word? Doing something for a company might be seen as endorsing it, and sometimes, it's probably true. But the one stipulation, and this is quite genuine, the one thing that gets anything on the channel is if I think it's cool. I have turned down a couple of projects, and genuinely it'll be because I think what you're doing is really neat. I'm happy to give it a shout out on socials or something, but the miniatures or the product doesn't speak to me, so I'm not going to do a whole video on that. Anything that ends up on the channel, because especially with a lot of the historical stuff that I've ended up doing with Warlord or War Games Atlantic, it involves quite a significant amount of time and research beforehand to then get it on the channel. So it's got to be cool. It's got to interest me. So I think it is that one stipulation, that it has to be exciting to me, and if it's something that I think will be useful to folks, I'm also more likely to go down that route and say, yeah, sure, send it my way. I'm happy to show it off.
There's a bit of temptation to kind of always do more, and how difficult has it been to maintain your workflow and work time to balance all the things that happen in your life?
I guess I've been lucky that never having really set a dedicated upload schedule, I've never been on or off schedule as a result. I do like to have at least a video up a week, and that one feels like, for folks who are patrons and who are supporting what I do, I like to make sure that there is something for them, But no, for the most part, there's always something to do. Whether it is a plastic kit that's come along that I like the look of, or especially with 3D printing now being a consumer level sort of technology, there are so many cool things out in the world that some days you just see it and go, oh, you know what, that's on the channel tomorrow if I can get that printed in time. So it's the workload is very hobby driven. I wouldn't call it work at all.
Are you still painting armies for yourself and playing games with people around you, or has that kind of taken a backseat because of the channel and the content?
It is rarer than I would like these days to have the time to spend on my own hobby. Definitely running the channel has cut into my hobby time. But that was, you asked earlier about, was there ever a temptation to give it up or to get jaded with it? And I think a couple of years in, and I did start thinking, man, this is sucking a lot of my time. But it didn't, on reflection, it became its own hobby. And being able to put things out into the world, one of the hugest things that happens for me is when someone will get in touch, they'll send a message or something and say, hey, I have just finished this army, or I've just jumped into a game, or I've painted a miniature that I would never have touched, or I was intimidated by, but then I saw your videos. And that, that takes a lot of the place of pushing models around the table. Yeah, it is nice. So it's really encouraging in its own way, even if it means I don't get to paint as many Space Marines as I might like.
Is there a particular video from your catalogue that sticks out as one that you're particularly proud of?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Because that old Imperial Guard one, it's dated, it's not as well edited as, it's a bit rough because it was one of my earlier ones, but that stands out as one that I am still really proud of, because I know that has, I've been told that has launched dozens of armies, and people have approached the hobby with it. Other ones, I cannot think of another one off the top of my head that really stands out. There are a few that I've been really proud of them, or I've really liked the result, and then they haven't landed quite right. They've kind of fizzled when they've gone out. That is a little disappointing.
When you say fizzled, what do you mean in terms of viewership or comments or what?
Mostly viewers and comments, because mentioning earlier how good YouTube is about giving you all that information, the back end, it gives you a stupid amount of analytics, and it's, at the root of it, YouTube wants you to be a more effective means for them to sell adverts. They don't care what you're doing. So when a video does well, you get all these wonderful little green markers on things. And then if it's not doing well, they did change this. It used to be little red markers on things, and then somebody who probably decided that this was driving creators insane changed it, and now it's little pale gray markers. But they're not shy about really pushing at a creator to, no, that didn't do well, don't do that again. Go back to what we know will give you little green, push the bar on the Skinner box and get the treat. That's what YouTube wants you to do. So it is hard to rattle that and to reconcile that with what you're doing sometimes.
How do you think, does that drive you? Does it drive you mad? How much does that affect you, the whole analytics thing?
It was harder to deal with when I got started. I did take it quite personally when things didn't fall within the usual averages of what viewers were looking at. But honestly, over time, I kind of got over it, because I realized I don't really give a shit if I'm helping YouTube sell ads, And sometimes, a lot of the videos that I've done have been motivated largely by spite, which sounds like an insane way of doing it, but picking something up from a question where somebody goes, oh, how would you paint XYZ? And I know that 3 people in the whole world are going to see this. But I also know that for those 3 people, there is nobody else on the internet who is likely to furnish them with what I'm going to do. So it is partly spiteful, and it is also partly, no, nobody does what I do, so I'm going to pick up that baton, and I don't care what YouTube tells me.
Yeah, I like that. I respect that, and I think anyone that's got that mentality is someone that I really, really agree with. I kind of go, ugh. I kind of just want to be like, yeah, I get it, and it's hard to resist that pull, and a lot of those little pulls are subconscious. Those little subconscious things that the system or the man would have us do or not do, and that's a very important thing that you mentioned there about YouTube is motivate, and it's not terrible. I'm not having a go at it, but YouTube exists in some ways, which is selfless, which allows us to connect. We would never have connected like this unless YouTube existed, and that's great. But it's also used in a sneaky and naughty way where it's all this advertising revenue and all these different ads and things like that. So it's definitely a bumpy marriage, and so it's quite hard sometimes to stick to yourself and stick to your true colors without deviating, because it's not something that happens like in a flash. it's kind of like something. It's a very slow erosion of those principles, just because of you just forget. It's one little thing here and one little thing that week, and then a year can go by and you turn around and you've actually deviated from your principles, more than you anticipated. So how do you stick to those principles? Do you write them on your wall and look at them every day? How do you maintain those? Because going back to that original recording something for a friend and putting it, how do you stick to that? Is it easy or is it hard?
Well, it is. I tell you what, there are a couple of motivators there. One of them is that spite. Like, I'll admit wholeheartedly that I can be a pretty petty person when I'm motivated to do so. A really good example, like if I go into my channel dashboard right now, it says in big letters on the side, ideas for you. You could earn 25 to 37% more by showing mid-roll ads. Now, I never wanted to show ads in the first place, but YouTube said we're going to put ads on everything and blah, blah, blah. So having some control over the adverts themselves was a motivator in putting that button on in the end. But they're not shy about trying to leverage you. And the spite helps keep me on the straight and narrow. But the other sort of guiding thing, it goes back to my grandfather. Because I was a young fella, I think I would have been 14, 15 at the time. And I do not recall what the conversation was about, but he said something that has stuck with me for 40 years, where he said, you can trade your whole life on your reputation, but you can only sell it once. Yeah. And that sat in my brain and has been coiled around my brainstem. Anytime the temptation comes up, I just hear him saying to me, you can only sell that reputation once. And it's never worth it.
That's really great advice, that, isn't it? It's really strong advice. It's amazing. And such a wise gentleman to kind of pass that on as well. And for you to pick it up and keep it as well. It's awesome. That's pretty cool. But the hour is rattling by. It's such a shame that we're kind of winding down. I never want to outstay my welcome, and I know that you're giving up an hour of your regular daytime. But as we begin to wrap up, a couple more things that kind of point out is that do you, how serious are you in terms of your craft of framing shots and making sure that your videos are accessible and clear? Like you mentioned before, that it was a hobby within a hobby. So how much time do you spend thinking about the craft and the technique of recording these videos? Or is it a case of just set up the phone, as long as it's in shot, we're good?
It has definitely been a learning process. And I think you can see that from the earlier videos to more recent ones. Every video was an opportunity to iterate on what was working or what wasn't. So by now, it is more of a case of, I've got my lights set up, I've got my boom in the right position, I know, bing bang bosh, I'm going to get a pretty good result just by throwing it straight down. But the early stages were definitely a learning curve of keeping things in focus at the very least. Yeah. And do you look outside of yourself for guidance with these? Is there other YouTube channels that you appreciate that you've kind of learned things off, or is it very much your own personal story and your personal trial and error? The only thing I think I've ever looked up on the subject of doing anything for YouTube was an old video from Gordon Bennett. I've forgotten his name. What's his name? From Geek Gaming Scenics. I can't remember it. How bad is that? But he did do a video on how he shoots for YouTube, and that was the one thing I needed some advice, and it happened to be there. The rest of it has been me mucking around.
Luke, Luke, there you go.
Oh, thank God, yes.
There you go.
If he ever hears this, I'm sorry. I can't believe that.
It's unacceptable. Yeah, okay, that's cool. That's interesting. Yeah, because it's always, I do this when I play war games, and I drive some of my friends crazy, is that I regularly play war games and I build terrible lists. And why do I build terrible lists? Because what exists in my head and what I think it might be compared to reality is often very different. And so sometimes a friend's like, well, what did you bring that guy for? It's like, I just thought it might be a good idea. He goes, well, it wasn't. And he goes, well, just go on this website and just, you can, I said, I go on this website and I post my list and then I get advice on it before I come to the game. And it's like, I'm not criticizing that, mate. If that's what you want to do, that's not a problem. But I don't want to do that, because the era of trial and is interesting to me. Figuring out what doesn't work is just as interesting, if not a little bit more interesting than actual success. You know, I play video games and I play strategic video games, and when I've kind of mastered the game and I know how to win the game, my interest level wanes then. So it's interesting that you're talking about that method with your video creation. It's just like, you're just doing stuff, and you'll make a video, you'll probably watch it yourself, and you figure, I'll change that this time, I'll change that next time, and that's good, I'll keep that. And that discipline of that is for me what life is all about and what improvement is all about, that kind of finding your own way. Because how you do it will be very, very different from everybody else, because you've made that yourself. And then eventually in the future, if you talk to somebody that does something like you do and they say they do something in the same way, that's an amazing conversation. It's like, dude, we arrived at the same kind of point but in very different ways, and there's a lot of experience, there's a lot of good chat in there, right?
Yeah, it's always super satisfying to bump into somebody who's of the same mind, you know, whether it be accidentally or putting it together over the course of years and figuring out what you're doing. Yeah, it is special to find that connection.
Yeah. Have you, a final question now? Like I said, I feel really sad that this is the last question now, but have you ever bumped into anybody directly or indirectly that you really appreciated as a kid? Maybe a rules writer or a painter or something? Have you ever bumped into anybody as you've been a YouTuber that's been like a little bit, takes you back to when you're like age 15 or age 18 and you'd be like, oh, I can't believe I'm meeting this guy?
Well, being where I live, I've never physically bumped into anybody, but I have been very fortunate. Like the position that I'm in has led to folks kind of coming to me or passing my name along in conversation to quite some cool people. So I have had the opportunity, a brief email exchange with Paul Sawyer back in the day. Gav Thorpe, I've had the chance to chat to a couple of times. Henry Hyde from Battle Games, you know, he's just an awesome chap to chat with. I have been extremely fortunate, and I do think sometimes if I could go back and just tell little 14, 15-year-old Troy, mate, you've got no idea what is coming. You know, it's going to be quite a ride.
That's cool. And so, what about the future then? Are we just normal service is going to be carried on for as long as possible? Is there anything new or different that we might be able to anticipate over the next few months and years?
I would love to be able to do battle reports because I play quite a few games solo, and people have asked me, oh, well, how do you make that work for different systems, and how do you surprise yourself? A lot of the questions common to new solo wargamers. And I figured, well, that would be something I'd love to share, but I need to figure out how exactly to do it. So that is the next step of trial and error. Nice. But otherwise, painting side, it's going to be more miniatures, more of the same, but hopefully interesting stuff to look at.
Yeah, and final question: has Lady Wife ever shown any interest in painting or playing?
Oh yes, she has. She has quite a large Stormcast army. She did come to me recently, and she wanted to play bolt action, so she took my British out and whipped me across the table. That was a little embarrassing because she did not know the rules at all, but she was absolutely walloping me. No, she is more into smaller scale, like skirmish stuff, like Frostgrave or Silver Bayonet. But she's a painter and a gamer herself. We've got a lot of connections there.
Nice, that's amazing. But anyway, Troy, like I said, I could speak to you all day, but I know you're a very busy guy, and I don't want to outstay my welcome. But first and foremost, thank you for the chat. I really appreciate it today, and I'm sure the listeners do as well. And secondly, thanks a lot for all of your content that you put together. It's been very, very helpful for thousands and thousands of people across the world. And the final thank you is just thanks for the mentality. You know, that being a positive mentality, a positive reminder of the good hobbyist. And yeah, it's just great hearing you speak about things, and it's great hearing you talk about your mindset and all that sort of stuff. It's really heartwarming to speak to you. So thank you a lot for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, more than welcome, man. Thank you for having me.
There you go, episode 244, all wrapped up there. What a nice chap. I've been wanting to talk to Troy for a long time. Didn't even know he was called Troy until I reached out over the interwebs. But really nice guy. Just really good videos, really great content, really good mentality. Kind of Bob Ross figure, right? You kind of like, you just feel all nice and warm and fuzzy when you're watching some of his videos and kind of interacting with some of his content. If you're not aware of Sonic Sledgehammer Studio on YouTube, go and take a look. It's good, especially if you like during the show he mentioned, if you're maybe painting something in a hurry, or you're just not particularly that bothered about taking it to, like, you know, super epic elite level. Really, really great guy with really great content and always good. Yeah, awesome. Thanks to Troy if you're still listening. If you're now officially a post-ramble rambler, thank you for coming onto the show. We really appreciate it, and keep going. We're all kind of metaphorically standing on the side of the road as you run past us in the marathon, kind of going, woo, yeah, keep running. I hope you keep on finding the joy and finding the positivity and creating content for as long as possible, because we all really enjoy it. Hobby stuff, a big hobby milestone this week for me. I finished off my Lightbringers, and I've started to turn attention to the Paint All the Minis annual. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a little bit, because we might need your help. Don't know, we'll see. But anyway, yeah, I finished off my Lightbringers, which is the final unit in the first batch of my Baratheons that I play A Song of Ice and Fire with. So I started getting the guys together for some group pictures. So that was really cool. You know, when you look back over your shoulder and you look at the minis that you painted, I think it's start of February, I think I started painting. I mentioned it as well, like the whole instigator for Baratheons was that I was playing with Lannisters, and I liked Lannisters and I liked painted Lannisters, but in order to play Lannisters well, you needed to be a bit of an arse. Because the whole thing about Lannisters is shutting other people's fun down. You are the morale stomper, so to speak. So in order to play the game well with that faction, you've kind of got to be horrible. So I think I'm horrible enough in my normal day-to-day. I don't want to extend it to my hobby time. So I kind of put the Lannister faction, I painted all of the faction. I put it on the Chinese equivalent of eBay and for a silly amount, and then someone bought it, which I had mixed feelings about. But anyway, and then the guy that I sold it to, he was asking me what I was going to do next, and I said that I was going to start painting a new faction. He said that he wanted Baratheons and wouldn't mind painting for him, so I was like, yeah, no problem. So I've been kind of painting 2 or 3 of every unit so far. So I think I have 7 units now, and like another unit of individual characters, so that's like 8 units effectively. So that's 8 times 12, so that's what, 98? Oh, dude, tell you what, I'm going to keep this in because it just shows how absolutely fucking terrible I am at math. Okay, so 8 times 12 is 96. Yeah, I was right. Okay, so 96. So it's 96 miniatures that I've painted for me, which is a lot. February through to mid-June as we talk here. So that's what, February, March, April, May, June. 4 months, about approximately 4 months. 96 individual dudes is pretty good with their basing and all that kind of stuff, but also I painted double that, maybe a little bit more than double that, because the guy wanted 2 of some units. So I've kind of painted, 200-ish miniatures in 4 months, which is pretty good. Personally, I'm not like tooting my own horn or anything like that, but it's a lot of stuff done. Audiobooks have been my best friend. I've been listening to some David Gemmell books. I've been listening to The Lord of the Rings also. I listened to Fellowship of the Ring, I listened to The Two Towers, and I've also been listening to a couple of David Gemmell books. I've kind of pootled along. It's been really good, but I am starting to feeling the need to paint maybe one unit instead of 2 or 3 at the same time, and maybe take that one individual unit to a higher level. So I've started painting some iron makers from House Greyjoy, and then maybe when I get back after summer, the guy's going to send me the second batch of Baratheons. I can start mooching along with those ones. I've painted about just under half of the whole Baratheon faction as an individual, so it's been really good kind of getting them all out the boxes, because some I painted a while ago, maybe March, end of February time, so I get them out to play games with, but getting them out and taking some group pictures, starting to think about the annual. So yeah, change and pivot. In 2021 we put together the Paint All the Minis annual. Kind of the thinking was, from when I was a kid, I used to read weekly comics in England, the Beano and the Dandy, and characters like Dennis the Menace, Roger the Dodger, etc. You may or may not know it. But anyway, towards Christmas time, a little bit like the Guinness Book of World Records, you probably heard of the Guinness Book of Records, right? So every Christmas they would release an annual, which was like a compilation, like a super bumper edition comic. I'm not sure if all of the stories were unique or whether it was like the best stories from the course of that year, but anyway, I would often get like the Beano or the Dandy annual for Christmas off Santa Claus, and then when you tootle around the family, when you you're on Christmas Day, this is like pre-internet era and pre a lot of video game era, you would just read the Beano annual while your mum and your dad were drinking and carrying on, so you'd kind of like just put that physical barrier so you didn't have to see what they were. I'm joking. And so we, in 2021, we put together the Paint All the Minis annual. So it's this kind of same theme. It's kind of like a hardback book with tutorials and articles from people in the hobby industry, and we call them box to battlefield, so like big painting projects that people had completed across that. So the Baratheons are going to be the first potential article in the Paint All the Minis annual. Is there going to be an annual? Don't know, but from July this year to July next year, that 12-month period, we're going to try and collate a whole bunch of articles that might hopefully populate the annual, so people could buy it. It's like a kind of coffee table book. If you don't know what a coffee table book is, you can go back and listen to the conversation that I had with Matt on Bedroom Battlefields, where we talk about coffee table books, what they are and why people like them. And I mention it not to, again, for kind of like some sort of self-gratifying way, but if you've got an article that's in your head and you're waiting to spill it out, if you've got an idea for some content but you don't want to host your own website, you don't have your own blog, give us a shout, because we're going to populate the website with it. So the Baratheon article is going to go up on the website. If you haven't looked at that, you can go and have a look at it. There's lots of articles that have come up over the last couple of months. But then also, if we get enough decent articles over the course of the next 12 months, from July to July, hopefully we'll put together an annual and people can potentially pick that up. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you picked up the last Paint All the Minis annual, give us a shout, because I know that a lot of people did. And it just, it was good. We managed to break even, I think, on the last one. We managed to pay for the artwork for the next one, because again, it's on Drive Through RPG. If you want to check it out on Drive Through RPG, I think you can pick it up from Noble Knight Games in the US, and there's a couple of other places you can pick it up from. But it's something we'd like to get going, because not that we think that we want to publish books and whatever, it's not a case of that. It's just a case of celebrating the community. All the articles came from people that are in the Paint All the Minis community. So I'm a published author. I'm not really, but just to see it as a physical thing is pretty cool, and just to celebrate that journey, to kind of note that journey, and to kind of to send those annuals out to the people that have contributed was pretty nice and pretty special. So if you want to be involved in it, just come and give us a shout. You can email paintalltheminis@gmail.com. You can reach out on Facebook. You can reach out on the Discord, or any other way, and you come and be involved in it. It's just about the tide that raises all boats. It doesn't matter how big your boat is, or how small your boat is, or how nicely buffed your boards are on your deck. it's just about sharing stuff. So yeah, if the annual kind of is something that appeals to you, then give it a look and come and contribute in it. We'd like to. But it's not just about me, it's about your hobby journey too. So I hope that you're having a good hobby week. Hope you had a good hobby week. Hope you're heading into a good hobby weekend. Try to release the episode on Friday so you can maybe find some hobby time over the weekend and you can get involved. I think that's enough of the post ramble. A little bit of a ramblage on the annual. I don't think there's loads of stuff that I could talk to, but I want to keep the ramble to an acceptable ramblage duration. So take it easy. Hope you're well. Hope you're keeping things on an even keel. 1 week for me, and then I'm off for my summer holiday, which is awesome. I'm tired and I'm ready for a holiday, and I want to go and eat some pasta in Italy, which is what hopefully I'll be doing. So take it easy. Until next time we're together, keep painting.